Call to order.
Okay, so we'll bring this meeting to order. We are operating under the emergency procedure rules of the state of Virginia and as initiated by the library in, I believe, May of 2020.
Correct.
And so we'll bring the meeting to order. The main thing on our topic is to discuss the discrimination, harassment, and religious accommodation policies. I would say if we think Jenny, I would love for Jenny
I agree.
to be able to introduce religious. So let's start with discrimination.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen with everybody. So I'm sorry, you want to start with religious? I thought
No, it's just defer that
Yeah.
till a second.
Okay.
What I meant to say.
So we talked about this a bit at last month's meeting, the need to add a discrimination policy for JMRL to clarify JMRL's relationship with the city of Charlottesville there. Not much has changed here, but I have a little bit of suggested added wording, and then we can look, Mike, if you like, at the city of Charlottesville's personnel policy 3.224 to show where JMRL will turn if there's a procedural need here.
Yeah, I think that would be useful due diligence, at least first.
Okay. Let's.
So what I see you've added was something we discussed last month, which was, and I'm just reviewing for everyone. The question was, there's a requirement to report if you witness something, but how, who, what, why, where, and when was kind of left out. So we're trying to be more specific here. And did you add all of the yellow, or really just had it?
I just added the red.
You just had to add the red, okay. And you took out immediately because that's kind of vague. So so in the back of everyone's mind here, if you think there's a need to put some time frame rather than now there's no time frame, then think about what that would say or what that would be. Okay, great.
So it's a very lengthy procedure here that the city still follows, and it does a good job of making sure that employees are aware that they can step outside of the realm of their chain of command in order to get these complaints across. So this is the city's procedure here is strictly for sexual harassment. It's not a discrimination policy or anti-discrimination or anti-harassment policy. So I think we need to clarify that too in our language, that this is the procedure that we will follow. They have policy statement, definition, and then that section that we're referring to discusses the actual go here, talk to this person, do that, and then also the timeline for responding. So were JMRL to find themselves in a situation where they had a case like this, we would engage City of Charlottesville's HR and follow these steps precisely. The only difference being that where it says that the complaint would come to a city official or supervisor would come to the library first. So these steps would come either to the direct supervisor or another supervisor or straight to JMRL admin, and that's laid out in the wording. So they're looking for a written complaint and looking to initiate an investigation. And then there will be a confidential investigation, prepare a written report, and I believe it's 10 days is the goal there. So the interviewer, which would be some combination of myself and the city of Charlottesville likely, would talk to the complainant and the person who made the complaint and the person the complaint was made against. Document all that and then talk to any witnesses as well. There's some very detailed information about whether or not that initial report would have any direct, like this was or wasn't a case of sexual harassment. So it's just more to get all the facts on order. Yes, 10 days, 10 business days. So that's after the complaint was taken. So that doesn't address the question of how long you have to file a complaint. And then an interim report will go to the director of HR before the end of the 10 days. And then the status of the investigation shall report in the same manner to the department head at 10 business day intervals. Sorry, my glasses are fogging out, and I can't read when I take them off.
Join the club.
Yeah. So ultimately, the HR department of the city of Charlottesville, likely in consultation if need be with their attorneys or with the insurance companies that JMRL has, will make a determination about whether there was a finding in the case that was happening there.
And this 2 business days is their target for making that determination?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Well, it says both should be accomplished within 2 business days, so I think depending on how you interpret that, but I would say 2 days would be the expectation.
Either that or it would be
4
full
days.
2 weeks. Yeah, right.
Okay, so then if they have to have a finding within 5 business days, they're gonna let that finding be known down the line and determine the appropriate disciplinary measure to be taken, which up to termination, of course. If there's not a finding, then no adverse action should be taken on the basis of the claim. If there is going to be discipline against the employee, okay, other than what was set forth in the definition of harassment, then the department head can impose that discipline, even if the charge was unfounded. And then the last, this is I here, once the director of HR has rendered the determination with respect to the merits of the complaint and the person is subject to the complaint shall be notified in writing of the disposition. Okay, at that point, the discipline should also be known, and that would all be part of that communication. HR will file even an unfounded copy there, but no other department should keep that. If
So
there's
that
a-
will only be maintained at the city.
That will be maintained at the city, yes. In the event that the director of HR determines that there's clear evidence that the complainant has intentionally made a false accusation, then there's a disciplinary chain open for that. Okay, and then the last bit, which is maybe the most important one here, is that an employee may utilize the city's formal grievance procedure to appeal the final determination of the director of HR. So I don't think we need to then say, okay, follow that, but JMRL also uses that grievance procedure if there was a grievance against either against the department or something like that.
And everything you've just read is under the same subhead that you
Yeah,
referenced.
3.2.24.
So
Okay,
we've
so-
incorporated all of it. basically.
Yeah,
So the difference then between the way the Charlottesville personnel policy is written and what we are actually proposing for the library staff is a much broader definition of harassment.
correct. So I think that likely here, we might have to specify that that's the procedure for sexual harassment.
Oh,
Because there is no written out procedure for
for any other kind of
discrimination.
harassment.
Yeah, for other kinds of harassment.
And is the city in any position to start thinking about broadening that policy? There are other forms of harassment.
Yes, we are all aware that the city is working on a new
But you have,
personnel manual, but it has not been made available. So I don't know the answer to that.
And I don't think we have a time frame,
No.
even a very broad one. I'm comfortable. There's some detailed steps, and I'm comfortable if the question is, well, this is discrimination and everything there says sexual harassment. We're saying we're using those steps. I'm pretty comfortable.
Yeah, I think we're laying out what the process would be.
Yeah.
okay, but so I think probably you need to
Be more specific.
say that the process will be followed will
I mean, it says the
be
steps, but
identical
yeah.
to the process for sexual harassment claims.
Be of the same, yeah. Does that do it, Marcy?
I think that would do it, because I really think that if we're gonna go through this and put this into policy, we need to make it fit the categories that we would like to have protected.
Sure.
Okay, but then I'm a little confused because it would, so then any sort of harassment would then go through the city process, but is the city okay with that?
That's the
Yes.
note I just made, is that
Okay,
that, I've I hazard a guess that yes, like they would follow the same procedures that they have laid out
Okay,
for harassment, for any other sort of discriminatory basis, but we need to double check that before the board
Yeah.
would adopt that.
okay,
And hopefully they will be able to tell you at that point whether this is something they're considering for the updated policy themselves. You know, broadening the categories.
Yes. That'll be up to them.
I know. One would
So-
hope that it's just enough of a prod that they might actually give us some information.
Ginny is at Central. She will be here shortly.
So I have a broader question, which would apply to both this and also the sexual harassment policy, which we just inherit from the City of Charlottesville. So especially those steps that I just read are all focused on workplace inter-employee interactions.
Correct.
But I would hope that this would apply to our employees and their interaction with patrons, for example, both in terms of discrimination and in sexual harassment. I suppose if I'm reading this and I see that I'm an employee and I see another employee discriminating in some way, I think I'm obliged to report that. And I would have to re-look at those steps to see if that sort of would then fit, that, hey, we're investigating this report. You know, I can imagine videos being pulled, so do those steps still apply, first of all? And secondly, if a patron feels discriminated against or sexually harassed, I suppose it's, you know, in practice, they're not going to have read our policies and so forth, and they're just going to talk to a staff or email. I think we've seen in the past an email to the library director or even trustees. I guess my question is, is there anything we need to, so do you all sort of feel that I'm on the right track, that this should also cover those sorts of instances? That'd be part A. And then part B, is there anything that we need to change either in this or sexual harassment from City of Charlottesville, since we're sort of looking at that at the same time, even though we've decided to stick with what the detailed policy they already have?
You know, that's a tough one because in all of the things that the examples that we were given and the other handbooks, they tend to all be about workplace. You know, this is how employees interact with each other, probably because they're from employee manuals and things like that.
Yeah.
So I have yet to find anything or see anything that has the level of detail that the city's sexual harassment policy has when it comes to non-workplace interactions.
Well, but this, I think what Mike is talking about is perhaps harassment within the workplace of someone who's not an employee.
Right.
Yeah, I'm talking about everything I'm mentioning right now would be, I guess, within the workplace, but yes, and I'm thinking of I don't want to get too much into the details, but in our conversations recently, our council sort of invoked this in the general framework. And he did seem to feel that would be part of something you're putting into employee handbook or whatever to tell everyone. I mean, it seems obvious in today's culture, but just to put down in writing, hey, we don't discriminate on these bases, and you know, regarding anyone. So I think his intent was this sort of thing would apply.
I think his intent was to make sure we tied it into workplace,
Yeah.
you know, activities, because that's where the library has the strongest case,
Right.
you know? and,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
That's where
Right.
where the board and myself have more authority to you know.
Well, I think if you were going to expand this to interactions between staff and patrons, you would need to put a sentence in there before the second yellow section, not the equal employment. I mean, you know, that those two sentences, equal employment, blah, 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 they specifically refer to other employees. But here, you would also, I think, want to say that similarly, discrimination by staff of patrons on the basis of these protected categories, you don't need to enumerate them again.
See,
But it can go both ways. So
But how are you gonna discipline the patron?
you can't discipline the patron, but you can acknowledge the harassment.
Right, I mean, the way we discipline patrons is already laid out in the policy manual.
Yeah,
Just
they-
they are restricted
we
in
would
their
likely
use of the library.
treat that as a violation of the conduct policy.
Exactly, the conduct.
And we have, that type of thing has happened in the past.
But I don't think we want to send them to the city of Charlottesville.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
city of
Yeah.
Charlottesville wouldn't know what to do with those
Right.
things. On the other hand, staff discriminating against
anyone.
patrons.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
or anybody else in the library. If there are people like in Nelson County, there are the service guys from the county who take care of things within the library.
so if I read only the first sentence, it doesn't, it's broad, it applies just don't discriminate.
That's right. But then you go into
Then we
equal employment
start talking about
opportunity, you're
workplace,
talking
sure.
about employee to employee.
Yeah,
So I think that's why you need to have,
well, can we just do something shorter after the word characteristic, say comma,
where's
what,
characteristics?
sorry, after the end of the first sentence, and say comma, whether X or Y, and then we're, something like that. I don't know. Is that short? Because that is the sentence we want. We just want to make sure that sentence.
Members of the public.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing is that these types of policies really are in place as like a boilerplate, protect the organization to
Yeah.
show that they are following the procedures.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to do two things at once here, which is very much the JMRL way.
Yes.
Any thoughts out there on Zoom, by phone? No, just shaking heads.
I think just having the benefit of the conversation we had with council, because that's where this came from. I think he would discourage us from a lot of wordsmithing. And B, I think he would claim that the first sentence is generally applicable.
I think you're right.
It's just then, I just like to be clear, so we're gonna say it's generally applicable, but to the greatest extent possible that we learn in advance that it's generally applicable. I prefer to do that, but I suppose I could live without the addition. Ask him about it again,
Yeah, I was kind of thinking maybe,
especially since we did add something else.
I was thinking maybe we could do two things here. We could reach back out to the city and make sure that that they are on board. One, they're gonna have to agree to the overall
Broadening
project, right? And
use
then
of the
two,
policy.
the language that we've got here, and then also reach back out to the council and say, hey, these are the edits that we were thinking about.
Yeah.
Because if you recall, the council actually sent us a whole long sexual harassment policy to go along with this, and in discussions, it seemed like, well, we've already got the cities, they've got a very detailed methodology, procedure for that.
Well, in definitions.
Yeah, and the definitions in place.
Okay, given that, I'm happy to, I think if the group thinks that simple addition captures what I'm speaking to, I'm happy showing that to the council as, as his after the fact review. And if he doesn't, if for some reason he feels it's a problem, we
I
strike
think
it.
that's not quite what you want to say,
Which one?
whether the targeted individual is a staff
Yeah.
or a member of the public.
So maybe it has to be up to
Because
discriminate.
whether staff or members of the public could suggest that maybe we might go after members of the public using this policy.
Discriminate.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't you just say whether interacting with other staff members or members of the public? Or when interacting with other staff members or members of the public.
Yeah, I think I do like when a little better. Well, yeah, sure. Yep.
Okay, seems like an action plan.
Okay. And, okay, so we're ready. So this next step is, if everyone agrees, we'll get a final sort of sign off by the council since he originally, and also City of Charlottesville. If we have both of those, can we say that this has been recommended by the committee without a further, agenda discussion by this committee?
Yeah, unless something came up when the city said,
Right.
Yeah.
But if,
oh, no, we're
if everybody failing any stoppers or red flags from those folks, then at the next opportunity, we'll present this to the
Potentially,
board.
it could be presented in red in
Yeah.
July.
And is it worth showing the language today, or should we just say, update that we're close with the final resource and final review? I think update.
I think that's fine because that's a pretty major hurdle to pass.
Yeah. All right. Two other things we're hoping to get to with 35 minutes.
We could skip to the other policy again and wait for Jenny.
I mean, the library.
All right, why don't you, yes, please introduce that.
Okay, section 3.1, disposal of library equipment. This is up for our annual review because we review all of our policies every 10 years.
Each policy.
Each policy. So this was last 2011. Very simple. Equipment purchased with state or federal funds or other grants may be disposed of using the process specified by the applicable funding agency. Equipment purchased with other than state or federal funds will be disposed of through the City of Charlottesville equipment sale. Any income derived from the sale of such equipment will accrue to the library equipment fund. Okay, so I brought this to both JMRL's, I almost said departed, JMRL's former business manager and our new business manager, and the three of us had a conversation about it. The only real concern that the staff has about this is this sentence, equipment purchased with other than state or federal funds will be disposed of through the City of Charlottesville equipment sale. That's not always the case. There is equipment that sometimes we have been told, if it's not usable, if it's a broken chair, for example. we can dispose of it. So the suggestion was to change that to say be disposed to the City of Charlottesville's surplus equipment procedures. So basically saying, and that includes the sale. So it would either go to the sale or whatever the other procedures were there.
I don't mean to interrupt, but can the Zoom folks hear you now?
Can you guys hear us?
You press mute.
Yes.
I didn't know what to make was. Okay.
I was thinking about muting somebody, whoever was feedback.
Yeah. No, but I thought you might have muted us. So,
Yeah.
okay, sorry for the interruption.
No problem. So that seems straightforward to me. Like for example, right now, the equipment sale has not been able to hold the physical sales for over a year. So they're currently not accepting any equipment, and currently JMRL is storing a lot of that. But there are things now that maybe we would have tried to give to them. Instead, we'll call and say, hey, is it all right to dispose of X, Y, or Z? Anything that has any value goes to be resold. But things that no longer have value, basically. But at any rate, I don't think we need to get into all that. We just need to say we'll follow the procedures.
And so is there ever a case where like other funds, so like grant money or fundraising money was used to buy equipment, let's say for one of the new facilities, that is, and then it doesn't make its way back to the City of Charlottesville? I guess maybe that hasn't come up because the facilities haven't been that old.
You mean something needs to be disposed of?
Yeah.
And they wouldn't accept it
No, I'm just thinking it's coming from,
from other sources?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming from other sources. The money was raised in Louisa
Sure.
through the fund there. And the item is no longer usable for us or not needed. but it's still usable in some way. Does it always make its way back to Charlottesville?
Not necessarily, and this did come up when Louisa went through a renovation.
Mhm.
Last year, there was some equipment that was purchased for the original building and was gonna be superseded chairs, tables, things like that.
Yeah,
So we talked to the county to see if they wanted it first, because it was originally bought with fundraised monies. And they didn't want it, and in the end, I think, we could take that to the city, they would dispose of it for us, because likely it depends on the funding streams, basically. Most everything, even fundraised things, are bought through
sure.
JMRL, which means that they went through the city's procurement process, but nothing for Nelson that we bought with the Grow Nelson has all gone through the Friends of the Library. So then, it's at JMRL's discretion, basically. If there's use for it and value for it for the local community, we do our best to make sure that.
Do we need to say that then in some way? Like,
could.
that there are times when,
Right, see if I have an editable copy of this. Yeah, I take your point that we could say, I think the goal here of this policy, as I read it, is to make sure that tax dollars aren't being squandered. You know,
right,
that if it came from tax dollars, that we're doing our best to get value out of it.
sure. But the reality is that there are things that never make it to Charlottesville because they don't have a value to Charlottesville, is that right?
Correct.
They don't have a resale value or a reuse value within the Charlottesville system.
Correct. So what would that sound like? It would be maybe a separate, because it's kind of state and federal, local.
Why don't you put it in that first sentence, state and federal funds, other grants, or local? Or
Well, actually,
it's
does
local.
or other grants already cover this?
It could be read that way.
Wait, do you click, so like in Nelson, those things went through the Friends Fund, through the CACF, right? But you're not then going back to the Friends to be like, I mean, obviously this hasn't come up yet,
Right,
but
20 years from now.
20 years, 15 years from now. Yeah, you probably won't go back to the Friends and be like,
They're not gonna want any equipment
right,
at that point.
you certainly wouldn't go to CACF.
No, so if we were looking to get some value from it, we likely would go through the
City of Charlottesville,
Same.
because if it come back to the library,
Right.
it's not like it's funding Charlottesville.
yeah, exactly, it comes back to JMRL.
Right, I understand that.
But I think what you're describing though is a case where there was an other grant and there was no disposal process probably
Right,
specified. So if
Right,
you want to
and
cover
so-
that case, we could.
it stayed in the local community, is that right?
Well, I mean, if you're taking other grants as these community funds raised specifically for one branch, then must be disposed of using the process specified by the applicable funding agency. That means you go to them and you say,
Okay,
what do you want us, just like you did with. So I think the problem there is grants. If you just say, or other,
or donations,
or
grants.
yeah, or other donations, that would probably.
Well, okay, but now. Okay, here's what I'm reading now. So if you're doing this, you're saying it's either state or federal or something else, then you do this. Then the second paragraph says, well, if it's something else that wasn't state or federal, then you do this. So we have an overlap. I think now within looking at both sentences together, I think the intent of the other grants is probably state or federal grants.
Or foundation grants. I mean,
Well, that would be the second sentence though. Because it wasn't a state or a federal fund.
funds.
But there. Okay, there you have. So you're really limiting. By the second sentence, you're really eliminating other options of going to Louisa, for example, to ask if they want permission.
Unless you say, okay, in that case, we're going back to the grantor there, and we're gonna use the process specified by the applicable funding agency.
So then you just go on calling it a grant.
Yeah. And in the case of Louisa, most of the funding that was fundraised was provided by the Louisa Library Foundation. And we
Okay.
certainly, Wendy would talk to them and say, hey,
What do you want us to do with this?
yeah, do you want this table? And sometimes they might say, oh, yeah, give it to the
Yeah.
Boys and Girls Club or something
Okay,
like that.
so if you, then you don't need that or other.
No, probably not. Yeah, I think this covers.
But I also kind of feel like if the hypothetical Louisa might have wanted their stuff back, they should have told us that at the beginning. And then there would have been a process specified.
Nobody thinks about that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's,
It's gonna be there in perpetuity.
Right.
right, it's gonna last forever.
Yeah, it's a courtesy that, I guess. Does this wording allow us the leeway to do that courtesy of calling
think
Louisa
so,
back if they
yeah.
didn't tell us in advance?
I think the process specified doesn't say.
Does it say when?
when.
Yeah, sure. they
We could reach
okay.
back out,
Okay.
like we could reach back out to
Yeah.
any of the folks that we worked with for
Later.
the Grow Nelson.
Right.
Yeah, later they
See
should
what he-
specify.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, sure.
I think courtesy is the right word, because we're gonna throw something out that somebody worked hard to get to us, so
Yeah.
let's make sure that there's nothing else that they can use it for. All right, so we're back to where we were?
Yeah, with that one change, the
Yeah.
equipment disposal procedures, that's good.
Okay, and there was no other case where the Charlottesville disposal procedures, they don't want to mess with this old laptop. So then do we need a follow through at that point, of what do we do with it?
Well, that's why we changed it from the sale to the procedures,
Yeah,
because at that point, they do give us some leeway.
okay, that's
to-
part of the procedures
yeah, Part
already.
of the procedures are,
Okay,
if
fine.
we don't want this, then you can do this. and
Okay,
that.
great, perfect.
I think likely we could read this today if you wanted to.
Yeah, yes,
That's a bit of a change.
if we're ready, then. Any other, other discussion here or reasons not to, yeah, are we able to recommend this to the board? I think we are, but last call for any other. Okay, seeing nods, I think.
It's still, I still don't think it says what we're doing, but it's fine. I think for me, the word grant is the problem.
But they are grants, I mean, like from, not in the formal sense sometimes of an application and a competitive process. But if a foundation gives us money, then they are granting us money that they have in their control and giving it to us for our control. So,
Yeah,
and that's the
because
broader meaning of that word. In the research community.
really what we're saying is other fundraising efforts, is that right? It's not always a grant.
I think we could just be even more generic and just say other sources of funding and cover both of those. How does that sound?
I think it's good, yeah. I mean, then we wouldn't have, the future people wouldn't be,
Or how about
Worry
if you
about
say
it.
outside sources of funding, so it's clear this is not an internal one.
sure.
Carla, does that address?
Yeah, it's better.
That seems a little bit contradictory to me, because now the first paragraph says equipment purchased with state or federal funds or other outside sources of funding. And then the second paragraph says equipment purchased with other than state or federal funds or other outside sources of funding. And what does that leave?
That's a good point.
What if the second says, it doesn't just talk about the source as much as if there's no specified process.
Yeah.
Then that doesn't give you technically the ability to call Louisa back.
Yeah, you're good.
Or you could just say, equipment purchased with funds not derived from a specific funding agency or a specific funding source.
I think maybe grants was our best.
It's fine. I mean, I don't think it's correct, but it's fine. Like, I'll step aside, I don't care.
I mean, I guess in my mind, the debate is whether or not to take that second portion here and just specify that what we're talking about is local jurisdictional funds.
Right,
Because that's the important thing. That's the
Yeah.
one that our funders care about. If
right,
it's paid for by Greene County, then we shouldn't just be throwing it out, basically.
that's right.
But I think where it is right now is it allows us. It allows us to do this the right way. To make sure that we're not squandering anything. And it prevents us from squandering anything. So I think it's okay.
Rather than staying with the same with other than state or federal funds, because it really does leave out the other grants, right? Could you just say equipment that is not subject to a specific
Disposal process.
disposal process will be disposed of through the city of Charlottesville. Or specified, I guess. Disposal process.
Which is kind of what happens.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, we,
Stuff in the
one of those
fridge.
little tablets that were donated by some.
And I do like Marcy's idea of specified instead of specific.
Carla, does that?
Is that better?
Yeah, I like that better.
Except I think specified is.
Yeah, we don't add the
So
Cs,
there's
yeah.
too many C's or something.
Specified.
There you go.
I trained myself to work really well off my own little screen, but looking off that one, a little harder. Either reading or editing.
Okay, are we now able to recommend this to the full board?
I think so.
All right. Okay, so we have a religious accommodations draft,
We saved it for you,
which
Jenny.
was drafted by Ginny Reese after some really nice research. She sent some links along with it. Would you like to sort of introduce Ginny?
I don't know that I really have anything to say other than what's here. Some of the stuff that I noticed was just that we probably ought to say that there would be a conversation between management and the staff, because these aren't cut and dried situations. So I don't know if that is in this.
I thought you did say that.
Yeah, yeah, there it is down there, case by case. Yeah, I think the statement there, you know, provides staff at JMRL with protections.
But also, it also means that everybody has input into these decisions where it's appropriate.
I think my only question is the highlighted section there, and I would propose maybe changing that to allowing individuals to use leave, providing individuals with leave makes it sound like we're coming up with a
extra
new
leave.
leave category.
Yeah.
Instead, what we're saying is like, yes, that's a valid use of your leave. Is that okay?
Yep.
I think this is great, Jenny.
I do too.
Yeah, this is the AMA link that Jenny provided. It says libraries may also offer accommodation by adopting generally applicable leave policies that allow employees to designate 1 or 2 days as personal or floating holidays. So the intent there, it sounds to me, is again, you're using a pool that everyone has, but it's in terms of the timing, I think you would probably receive that consideration if that was necessary. Yeah. And then would it be useful to bullet point those, or or is the paragraph better under right where your cursor is would be the start of the bullets?
Let's look.
But it's not just limited to those bullet points necessarily either.
Right. Well, it says that at the beginning.
I think that always clarifies things and it's easier.
Easier to read. I think. Might be
Yeah.
easier. Paid or unpaid time. Oh, we're saying we're flexibly scheduling those things.
I think flexible scheduling and or adjustments to work schedules.
We'll just say maybe including.
Using
Yeah, I don't know if you want to say unpaid time off. Adjustments to work schedules covers it because otherwise,
Yeah, I think that's fine.
because unpaid time off is not a category that we have that's normal.
Yeah, it's not under extreme circumstances though, it
Yeah.
gets used.
Sure, yeah, but it's not.
But you might say, hey, you need 4 shifts from me this weekend. Could one of them not be on Thursday in order to accommodate?
Yeah.
I think that would be your unpaid.
Yeah, that's flexible schedule.
Yeah, I agree. So I think it's not.
And I think, Mike, in that scenario, in most cases, the employee and the manager would try to work out another time to do that 4th one, or they would want to use their paid leave if they're eligible for it.
Right.
Unpaid leave is actually a category of like somebody makes a request to the director saying, I need a month because I'm going to space, SpaceX or something.
Yeah. Okay.
I wonder if it would be that big.
Okay, and so again, you can scroll down. Well, there's these. The links are not here, but there were links to EEOC and others, and I was able to skim those, and I think this covers all of the bullet points that needed to be covered, that I read there.
Some of those other things belong in other policies, things that were in links that are not here.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So
Can you just adjust in the last bullet, the and or, just edit that. So it's just how the other.
So maybe
she wants a slash. I
maybe
think.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. What's your take on, do we capitalize and put these are not full sentences? Make sure we get it right.
I'm
We need
happy with-
periods.
I'm happy as is.
Check with Lisa.
Yeah, I'll check with Lisa or Megan. Do you want to give a reading for this today?
I personally would be comfortable doing that, but is the group ready to recommend this to the board?
I have a question.
Shoot.
I have a staff, well, it's a sub that she cannot work on Saturdays because that's the day that she observes her religious beliefs. So it does make it difficult for me when scheduling, because I have to, work around this person's schedule. They were hired before I started here. So will this policy cover, all staff, not just full and part-time staff, but subs as well?
Yeah, it would cover any paid staff. Now, it's a different situation with a substitute because they don't earn any paid leave, right?
Right.
And I think, Ophelia, what we're talking about here then is whether or not that accommodation is causing undue hardship. If it's requiring other employees to do more, like, are you having to schedule other people around that, basically? Are other people having to work more weekends because of that? Is it keeping somebody else from having that time off? I think that there's enough room in here where if it's causing an issue for you scheduling, then, we could address that with the individual.
Okay. All right, thanks.
But I would also say this is stuff we're doing because at least I think it's the right thing to do, but it's also stuff we have to do because we have to do it. And so we're just writing down. So I think, at that, but David is exactly right, that balance comes into play
Yeah.
at some point, especially in a smaller branch where there's limited subs and limited, just slots to fill, employees to fill the slots. So
Yeah, I think it depends on the scenario, right? If that person was hired to work every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it's not a concern, then, then it's great if you allow them that flexibility. But if you need, if you have X amount of hours of staff to spend every week and you need that coverage on Saturday, then we need to talk about it, I think, regardless of whether or not this policy is in place.
I guess the only question I had was have the other managers seen
No, that's a great
what
question.
you've read?
No.
Or did you discuss any of it?
No, that's a great point.
Then maybe,
Yeah,
maybe
agreed.
Let's
we
do
should
that.
have them. I mean, it's lovely. It really is, Jim.
For sure, yeah.
And I think you did a really great job, but since Ophelia has questions, maybe let the managers ask questions before we start the process and,
yes,
approve something that
great point.
they haven't seen yet.
Well, even if it's read this meeting, it could be run by the staff before it's brought up for a vote.
It's true.
If you wanted to try to.
It's just a matter of what's the time urgency. I would say this is again one of those things that we've identified through the employee handbook process.
Right.
Yeah.
Certainly it's already in place in the sense that certain laws, as Ginny has uncovered, it already apply to us. This is just our way of writing it down and affirming. So I would say we don't need to read it. But,
Yeah, I think I prefer, since it is a new policy I should have thought of that, Carla, so I'm glad that you mentioned
It
it.
also has been our process. It's just
Right.
a
Yeah.
courtesy
Yeah.
and, yeah.
I think it would have come up with the employee handbook, which does cover several of the managers, but you're absolutely right in terms of it. So by the next meeting, which is going to be 2 months, you will have brought this up at a managers meeting, and we'll just learn about any feedback.
Incorporate any feedback.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So today we have, but I think I can report for today's board meeting that we have an initial version that the committee is
Very happy.
ready to get the manager feedback. Check those papers. Okay. I think those are all of our agenda items. So do we have any last items for today? Okay, as far as next things, we're just a little behind the curve organizationally. I mean, in terms of my own organization. So by email, within the next week or three, we'll let you know some proposed items for future meetings.
Sounds good. Great.
Then I adjourn the meeting.
Adjourn. All right. All right.